Damn. So what is going on, guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about how much it actually costs to turbocharge the BRZ, and I'm not just talking about the turbo kit, I'm talking about the turbo kit and all the supplementary items that went into the turbo kit. So as you guys know, a couple weeks ago we had the car tuned over at ECUTEK Racing. This is my 2013 BRZ with an MA Performance turbo kit on it. We'll get into the specific details of the turbo kit here shortly. The car made around 282 wheel horsepower and about 233 foot-pounds of torque. Not too bad for a little 2-liter that's naturally aspirated from the factory, but how much exactly did it cost? I had some of you guys asking me. So first we're gonna start with the base turbo kit. So as you guys know, this is the MA Performance turbo kit. The wait time on this was around 4 to 5 months, I believe. We are running a Precision 4831 turbo. Now the entire MAP turbo kit with all of the extra options I got on it cost around $5,089 before tax, and I believe it was free shipping actually. Now like I said, the turbo is a Precision 4831. It is a journal bearing turbo. I did not opt for the ball bearing. If you do want the ball bearing turbo, I believe it's around $700 more from MA Performance. It did come with the PTP turbo lava blanket, the FIC 660cc injectors, a DW65C fuel pump. I did opt for the full-blown Motorsports oil pan just because I didn't want to reuse the stock one. I'd rather have one that already has a turbo drain on it and has a higher capacity for oil. For the blow-off valve, it is a Turbosmart Raceport blow-off valve. It is the one that is included with the kit. You don't really get much of an option. I mean, you either get to choose, I think it's the Raceport or some V port, something like that, and you do get to pick the color. I think it's between like black and blue or something like that. I opted for the black. I think the black looks a little bit cleaner. And then it also did come with the Turbosmart 40mm external wastegate. I think it's the Comp wastegate. I don't know what the difference is or the comparison of that over to tile, but I mean, it sounds good. It gets the job done. It does come with a factory 7 PSI spring in the wastegate, so that way you're not having to shove springs in there like we did on the STI on that tile wastegate, because that definitely was not fun to do at all. And then on top of that, with the turbo kit, I also got all of the manifolds and the exhaust coated from MAP, so that's going to include the downpipe and the header for the coating on that. It does come with all the intercooler piping, obviously the intake, all of the extra accessories that come with the turbo kit for the most part. There are some things that did not come with the turbo kit that you are gonna have to buy separately to make all of this work. Now, you are gonna need a tune on the car to be able to do that. Similar to WRXs and STIs, they have a tuning platform called ECUTEK. Some people call it ECUTEK, something like that. I bought the ECUTEK dongle and cable for around $600. It comes with a license as well. It's only good for one vehicle. After that, you just have to buy multiple licenses, but you can reuse the hardware on whatever other BRZs, FRSs, GT86s that you guys are playing with out there. So that was about $600. I believe I bought that one from Subi Speed. It's just like the tune yourself kit or something like that. And then while I was ordering from MA Performance, I did decide to buy their oil cooler. It was a separate purchase. It did not come with the turbo kit. And the oil cooler was another $429. So I think with just the turbo kit, the ECUTEK, and the oil cooler, I think we're sitting at around 7,000-ish. I have no idea. I'll like put a little pop-up right there, but already not cheap. It's already not cheap. Now, with the added power, I didn't want to run into the same problem that I ran into on the STI. With the STI, I decided to keep the stock clutch in there to see how far I could push it. With this car, I didn't want to do that, so we did opt for a competition stage 3 clutch in this car. It's good for about 300 foot-pounds of torque, so that way we're around 230. We're good up to like 300, so we have a big deficit there that we can still add more power onto the car without having to go and swap out a lot of the drivetrain components. I just didn't want the issue of the clutch slipping later down the road after we put this turbo setup on here, and just as the daily driver, I mean, I wanted it to be reliable, so having a strong clutch in there, not a bad idea. I also did opt for the competition lightweight flywheel because the flywheel is sold separately from the clutch kit. The flywheel was another $296.95. I have all those videos on it if you guys are looking to figure out how to replace the clutch in this car. I'll link it somewhere up there. But we also decided to do a lot more of the drivetrain components. I'm not going to mention them in this because they're not required components for the turbo setup, but they definitely do help. Now you're going to need a stronger map sensor because the map sensor in the car isn't going to be capable of handling any type of boost. So I did opt for the Omni 3-bar map sensor. I think it's good up to 3-bar 14. I think it's good up to like 28 PSI or something like that. You don't need a huge map sensor in this car unless you're running a lot of boost. So a 2.5 or a 3-bar should get you to whatever you're trying to achieve. The MA Performance turbo setup did come with catch cans, as you guys saw in our installation videos of doing all of this turbo setup goodness on this car. I just could not get them to fit in there nicely. I could not get them to sit properly or get the hoses routed properly. So I decided to go back to my RADIUM catch cans. I do suggest getting a set of catch cans or an air oil separator for this car if you are adding some forced induction to it. It's already a high compression engine, which means you are already at a greater risk of having blow by with oil getting past your rings. Having the catch cans or an air oil separator is just that extra step to ensure cheap insurance on the car to make sure that the engine is happy and healthy. For exhaust on the car, so when I bought the car originally, I bought this car back in February of 2020. The car came with a CATBACK on it, came with a TANNABLE exhaust. It's still on the car. I just don't want to spend the money to buy another exhaust right now, and I haven't had any issues with the TANNABLE exhaust yet. So that is the CATBACK we're running. As for a front pipe, we are running the NVIDIA front pipe. It is catless because up here in Washington State, no emissions for us. And then for the overpipe, I did get a TOMEI overpipe. As you saw, I did weld in the bung with the help of Devin for our air-fuel ratio gauge, but that will be mentioned here in a little bit. I'm not gonna go too much into that yet. For the CATBACK comes in at about $617. The front pipe came in at just under $200 at $195.99, and the overpipe was around $220. I just realized that I paid more for an overpipe than a front pipe, and the overpipe is a lot shorter. It does have more weird bends though, so I'll give it that. And then really the last required thing that you need for the turbo setup is going to be a radiator of some sort. So as you guys remember a while ago, I put in a coil radiator on this car. I accidentally stabbed it, oops, when we were putting all of the turbo setup back in the car. When I was doing that, I did stab the coil radiator with the AC condenser, and it started peeing coolant everywhere. So now we have a CSF radiator in the car. That came in at about $249. And then lastly, you're gonna need a tune on the car. A lot of people, you can buy OTS tunes. They're not really the best idea to do with forced induction on a naturally aspirated car. You can get E-tunes. I quoted Delicious Tuning around like $550, which they're very good at what they do. I got a local tune. I believe I spent around $800. It was just under $800. I believe it was like $779, something like that, for the tune at ECUTEK Racing. We are still working out a couple of the bugs with the setup, but for the most part, that is the vast majority of how much I spent on just getting the turbo setup to work. Now, there are a lot of other kits out there. You can do supercharged applications for much cheaper with an OTS tune because it's a lot more of a linear power band than you'd get from a turbo setup. You can also do cheaper turbo setups out there. You can do a lot more expensive turbo setups out there. This is just one that I liked because I preferred the turbo placement of this one. I liked the options that the turbo setup came with for the price. Now, I also did a couple extra little things. If you don't want to run the turbo off of just the wastegate spring, you're gonna need a boost controller. So I got the Delicious Tuning 3-port boost controller. I liked this one just because you can delete the factory PCV system and it still plugs right in. It's just a connector that plugs right in, so it's super easy to mount up, and I haven't had any issues with it at all. The Delicious Tuning boost controller did come in at about $150. And then, as you guys know, I like to monitor all things that are happening with the engine. I like to see what's going on just to make sure everything is running happy and healthy. So we did opt for an AEM boost gauge, AEM air fuel ratio gauge, and a AEM oil pressure gauge. Now, the boost gauge came in at about 165.01. AEM AFR gauge came in at about 211.93. Oil pressure was about 206, and then you need pods to put them in, obviously. So I really liked the placement of the ATI vent pod. That's the one that sits right to the left of me in the car, that sits right in in the vent and still allow air to flow through. That one was about $70 for the adapter from 60mm down to 52mm, just to be able to get that one in. So that was about 70 bucks. And then lastly, I got the Rex Speed gauge pod. It was the dual gauge pod, goes right over the A-pillar. You have to like glue it on there with some plastic weld or something like that. But the total for just the stuff to make the turbo setup run came in at about $9,535.12. Do I say it's worth it? It's honestly a lot of money to spend to potentially double your horsepower in the car, but it does set you up to make a lot more power later on if you do decide to go with a turbo setup over a supercharged setup, which is why I went with the turbo setup, because I know later down the road I'm going to want more power out of the car, and we can easily just turn the boost up rather than having to swap supercharger pulleys, get new belts, all of that kind of stuff. So for me, a turbo setup just made a little bit more sense. Now, if you want like the additional extras like I got with the gauges, the boost controller, and a couple other smaller things just to make sure that you know the car is running properly, that came in at about an extra $940.64, which puts our grand total to turbo this car at $10,475.76. That's a lot of money. Do I necessarily think it's worth it? If you plan on keeping your BRZ FRS GT86 for a long time, I do think it's worth it. I mean, I made the whole driving video about what I think about how this car runs with the turbo setup on there. So if you want to go check that one out, go check that one out. I'll link it right there. But it's a lot of money. People say you can swap the car for a lot cheaper. People say you can swap the car for around the same price. That's true to an extent, but once you start doing engine swaps in these cars, you lose a lot of the features that the car came with. And with this being my daily driver, I didn't want to go to the extent of swapping the car, putting a different engine in there, swapping out the ECU, losing some of the features as a daily driver. So for me, this turbo setup was the best route to go for getting more power out of the stock block and maintaining somewhat of the reliability that I could, but I'm happy with it. I know it's a little outrageous and it's a little expensive to spend $10,000 plus on a turbo setup, but I couldn't be happier with it. And I think if you guys want to do something similar, this is a good build path to follow for those who do want to do similar steps with their FRS, BRZ, or GT86 out there. Now, like I always say with these, there's always a cheaper way to do things. There's always a much more expensive way to do things. I try to find the happy medium between the expensive and the cheap route that'll get you the best reliability for the money. Now, I hope this video helps answer some of your guys' questions on how much I spent on this. I like being extremely transparent with you guys. I don't like lying to you guys about like cost or anything like that. I've definitely spent more money on this car if you look at suspension, coilovers, wheels, tires, everything else we've done to this car. This is just the basics of the turbo setup on the car. So if you guys like the video, you know what to do. Go ahead, hit that like button and turn it blue like the inside of the hood on the STI that's at home, because I didn't want to shoot this video in the garage today. And if you guys do want to support the channel, anything like that, we have a lot of stuff going on with the STI right now. I should be getting some photos back from Motorsports on the closed decking of our EG33 for the STI. So if you guys do want to support, swing over to the website. You can grab yourself some awesome drive hoodies, drive t-shirts, jet tags, anything like that. All the support is greatly appreciated, you guys. It definitely does mean a lot to me. And if you're not already subscribed to the channel, hit your boy up. We got a lot of fun stuff going on with the BRZ here soon, and we're working on the engine swap in the STI. But just hit the subscribe button. I'll put it in one of these corners. You guys know what to do. You guys know what to do. I know only like 30% of you guys are subscribed to who watch the channel, so I'm watching you other 70%. I'm waiting for it. But with that, I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, homies.